In this entry to my project's video journal, I will discuss the solutions that me and my tutor have discovered to the problems previously present in the project, as well as a remarkable piece of wisdom that I perhaps should have known much sooner. That would have saved me a tremendous amount of work. So, first things first, in regards to the randomly jumping off the ground backwards thing, that was actually a really simple fix. The issue was that in my player's grounded checker, which I just call feet, we had this. Where is it? There you go. So we had this particular send event here, which would send an event to the wall jumping script to let it know that we've grounded ourselves, so we're no longer going to wall jump because we're on the ground. But the problem was that during the process, I've changed the name of this FSM. So once upon a time it was just called FSM, and later I've changed it to wall jumping. So obviously I forgot to change the name here, and that was the issue. So that problem was solved. Other problems, yes, with this platform that was for some mysterious reason preventing me to jump off it. If I can just find it, it was this one here. So this platform actually had another platform inside, so there were two platforms clipping together. Now I'm not sure why this would be an issue, because they were both still tagged as floor. So either way, my player was standing on an object tagged as floor, so the script should have worked properly anyways, but it didn't. So removing that bad boy seemed to have fixed the issue. And what was the third thing we had an issue with? Random backwards jumps, not jumping off this platform. Yes, the third issue was the whole we can't have the jetpack while falling and wall jumping at the same time. The two scripts were conflicting, and for this I brought in a very simple solution, which I should have thought of much sooner. And this was a simple bool, so if I can just find it. Set bool value, bool test is wall jumping. I think I set it up here, maybe. Get key down. Yes, so it's this one here. So this bool is supposed to supposed to allow the two to coexist. So simply we flip this bool on, so when we are wall jumping, it basically lets the jetpack while falling script know, and this way it doesn't conflict. It no longer conflicts, because the issue was that we would have the two states on two transitions triggering simultaneously in this jumping script. So this transition here ensures that this whole script is disabled whilst we're wall jumping, to make sure the forces don't conflict with each other. This has been changed. Well, sorry, rather I should say that when we did our jetpack while falling, we weren't grounded. And when we did our wall jumping, we weren't grounded either. So those two were sending events to this state simultaneously, which caused confusion. So now, I can't quite remember where exactly I put this bool test. Maybe it's this one here. No. I think it might have been in the jetpack script. Either way, I can't quite recall where I put this bool test, which tests for this particular bool here, but either way, this prevents the conflict. And another major breakthrough was just how much more simply we could have did the whole. So you can, so the whole jetpacking thing. So you can see the old script here with the two different fuel values, and in the game master you've got this fuel actualization and the calculate fuel time and all this madness, which was a complete waste of time, as there is this ridiculously simple float add action where I just have to flick on per second. I think I tried to use this at some point, and I don't quite recall why it wasn't working or what issues I had with it, but right now they work just flawless. As you can see, these scripts are disabled, and when I get my game to run, it works just fine. Now the reason you couldn't see the gauge is because we had the scale decreased. There we go. Now you can see it. So that's the bugs fixed. Another thing I will discuss is the feedback I've received about the game. So I've had a couple people, 6 to be precise, test the game in the state after we fixed these bugs. I also finished the level itself, so now we have the actual end goal implemented. So we have, where's my cursor? There you go. So we have Uncle over here, as well as a couple scripts that manage the victory itself. As well as that, we also have a menu, or rather a welcome screen. We're gonna save this for now. So when you so now it's actually a proper full-on game. Obviously, it's very minimalistic, but we do have an introductory screen which gives you the instructions. Ideally, if this game was finished, it would definitely have a tutorial, because I understand that through testing especially, I had to come to realize that my mechanics are a bit unusual. So certainly, having a tutorial to help people with getting used to the game would be essential. But for the purposes of a prototype, this is sufficient. So we actually have the game go from one level to the other. That screen had a press space to start section. And it's interesting because when I was testing this game, it really didn't feel like the controls felt right for me, but of course, as with testing, I had to realize that that wasn't the same for everyone, and several pieces of feedback were provided, which I will all consider. Some of it I've actually implemented straight away. So, for example, the ceiling no longer kills. At least I believe it doesn't. Whoops, I didn't mean to pick that up. I will go through all of these in a second. So let's just see the ceiling. Yep, it indeed. At the moment you can go through it, which is something I'll have to change. And why was my wall jump not working there? Hang on. Okay, it does work. So yeah, now the game is properly finished. Or rather, I should say the prototype is properly finished. There's a start screen, there's instructions, there's a victory condition, there's a game over condition, there's some feedback given to the player about whether they've won or lost. So now let's cover what was provided in the feedback. So I've run this form with a couple simple questions. Just try to establish, because obviously people will find the game, people's feedback and people's perception of the game will to an extent depend on their own experience with platformers. Someone who's brand new to platformers and not very experienced will obviously find it more difficult, and that will impact on the feedback they will provide. So I had these questions here. How experienced are you with platformers? How good are you with platformers? How well did you understand the game before playing? So just based on this green screen, which I've completely expected to be on the not at all barely section. How well did you understand after a couple tries? How much did you like the game? How difficult did you find the game? As well as some open feedback. So if I just look through, we had, in terms of experience, we had very experienced, small amount of experience, substantial experience, small experience, substantial, Yeah, and with skills we had intermediate, intermediate, intermediate. I think everyone called themselves intermediate, pretty much, except for Cyan, who called herself seasoned. But everyone else, because people wouldn't call themselves at a beginner level, but they also wouldn't call themselves very experienced either, or I should say very skilled. So I would say we had like an average, the roughly the player base you would expect, the skill level that you would expect from the player base. Um, how well did you understand? So yeah, that with that one, how well they understood before playing, we had barely, barely, which is completely reasonable. I didn't expect anything else. Barely, fairly well. So I should also point out that with some of these pieces of feedback, I did experience a certain degree of niceness. These were my classmates. These people know me very well. Well, not very well, but they know me. So obviously, I think that skewed their feedback to be a bit more positive than it would have been. I think if I presented this game to complete strangers, they would have given me completely different feedback, and perhaps I shall try and do that. Remains to be seen. How did you understand after a couple tries? That was different. So she said completely, fairly well, fairly well, completely, fairly well, and barely. So he said he still didn't get it, which is again completely reasonable. I think this person actually provided the most honest and the most critical feedback, and also the most useful. How much did you like the game? He said he liked it a little. He liked it a little. He liked it a lot. He liked it a lot. He liked it a little. He liked it a lot. And yeah, that's it. I was really hoping someone would say they didn't like it, because not everyone will like this game, and feedback from someone that didn't like it would have been more useful. How difficult did you find the game? Challenging. So for those, the options were very easy, challenging, very hard. I tried to provide 4 options instead of the more traditional 5, because I wanted people to commit to one side or the other. I didn't want just middle ratings and everything, everyone just giving mediums. I wanted them to take a side, either towards easy or hard. Didn't want them to just say, "Oh, it was a medium difficulty." Yeah, I have a medium experience. I have a medium skill. Yeah, it was. I didn't want people to give just mediocres. I wanted them to commit one way or the other. So that's why I had these 4 options for pretty much for every question. So we had challenging, which is the second most difficult. Challenging, very hard, hardest, challenging, challenging. And this guy said easy, because he said that once you overcome, and I do see his point, it's perfectly valid, that he said that once you get around the controls, it's actually not all that difficult, and I do agree with him. So in terms of open feedback, which is the most important part we'll discuss now, open feedback from this lady. She just gave us some feedback about the art, not much about the game. Like, she thinks pixel art would be good for this game. At this moment in time, art isn't something I'm working on. In terms of plans, I do have some, but I would, if I was to make this game as a full-on project, I would like hand-drawn graphics for it, because I believe that it has a particular kind of romantic power, an ability to create this very intimate and personable atmosphere, which I think would help the game's overall theme, which is to do with personal emotions and longing for a family member, and a child's desires and ambitions, aspirations for growing up. So hand-drawn would be my art direction, but again, at this point, I was much more interested about gameplay feedback. RB, he said, slider was hard to see on the right, which is something we did change, so if I just demonstrate that really quickly. Yes. So, whoops. Oh yeah, I should probably open up the level 1 scene. So as you can see, because what we had to realize, which was perfectly legitimate. Why are you... Okay, I should disable this for now. There we go. So you can see that because the character is mainly on the left side of the screen, having this slider on the right meant that it was difficult for the player to keep an eye on both at the same time. So moving it to the left was a very rational choice, and I'm not sure why I didn't. Perhaps I'm just used to tracking lots of things on the screen at the same time, and that's why I didn't find it difficult. But this is why you have your game tested. Uh, and he also said that the screen comes very fast, especially if you don't understand the wall jump. Uh, and I think with that, the main section is the wall jump itself, which we will discuss more later. The third person, Mohammed, he gave up after a dozen tries, which again is reasonable. The game's not finished. There's not enough compulsion in it. Just because you have a bare bones of a game, that doesn't mean you're gonna want to play it. The Impossible game, for example, one of the main reasons you will want to play is because of the catchy soundtrack. In a way, you play this grinding, difficult game to be rewarded with the amazing tune that goes on. Or at least for me, it was a major piece of motivation. Uh, and also, he said that there's not a lot of. He he commented on the lack of little mini rewards for progressing, like collectibles and such. Um, I personally don't want to put collectibles in the game just for the sake of putting them in there. If I'm gonna put collectibles in a game, I want them to have an organic purpose. And at this moment in time, with the state of the project, I just don't see an explicit reason for me to put collectibles in there. It's just, did you complete the level? Yes, no. Of course, if I was to develop this into a full-fledged game, and there will be multiple levels, because if there's only a single level, then collecting anything is pretty much redundant. But if there's multiple levels and there's some overarching reward system across multiple levels, then it might be more reasonable to add collectibles. Uh, let's see. Found the jump unnatural, but you could get used to it. You jump very high. I asked the next tester after him whether he thought that the jump was very high. He said no. Nobody really gave us feedback on the jump itself. Most people seemed happy with the jump in particular. Most feedback was focused around the jetpack and the wall jump, which is what I've expected. Um, let's see, Carl. Okay, so he also mentioned something about collectibles and replayability. For this one, I would reference the Impossible game. There are no collectibles in the Impossible game, and with replayability, you would get your hours out of replaying or playing through how difficult the game is and how many tries it will take just to beat a level. So once you've beaten it, you wouldn't play it again, which is fine, because it took you so many tries to beat it in the first place. So if it was an arduously difficult task and you feel extremely satisfied for beating it for the first time, that's the emotion we seek to invoke in the player, not some kind of replay. Not every game has to have replayability, especially for a game like this. That even if there was some kind of minor incentive to play it again, it couldn't compete. You could never get that rush again that you got the first time you finished a level like this. So in that regard, replayability I don't think is a factor for this game. Collectibles, again, as I've said, if I had multiple levels and a more overarching gameplay feature that carries on across multiple levels, then maybe collectibles would have a purpose. But for now, just to put some collectibles in there to make the player feel good I just don't think that's a legitimate approach. I do have some things you can pick up, but these just help you with the gameplay, or rather, they're supposed to help you with the gameplay, which are these speed boosters. Let's see. Yes, controls are a bit weird and unusual. Jetpack should slightly elevate on its own. Yes, so let's talk about the jetpack. Several people provided me with jetpack that they jetpack feedback that they felt the jetpack should function differently. So the reason I went with this particular approach for the jetpack, this up and down, and it just disables gravity. First of all, the disable gravity was just the most. Oh, there was no jetpack left there. Disable gravity was just the most simple approach to enable a jetpacking thing. And the up and down keys are there to facilitate this particular kind of navigation that I'm showing on the screen right now, which is supposed to be a gameplay element. You're supposed to navigate certain like aerial mazes that you use this up and down for. And I thought that if the jetpack was constantly elevating you, that would like this, that would make it harder to control. Whereas if you're just hovering like such, I'm not gonna be able to get through this. If you're just hovering like such, then you have finer control. So this was to do with control being in mind. I'm still undecided if I should change it as such. I will have to consider it after I finish recording this video, and I will update the progress based on how I've decided. He also suggested a separate button for a jetpack and questioned if it is even a jetpack based on how it functions. I don't want to add separate buttons because, again, simplicity was an aim with this game. So he found it strange that the way the jetpack works is you would have to press the button again. But again, if you play the game, this is something I would like to chalk up to lack of a tutorial rather than an inherent fault in the game or the game's approach. Because if you just pressed tab space twice, again, you might not be used to it, but once you do get used to it, it's really not that tricky at all. It's just press space twice. I really don't think it's awkward at all. It's literally like a double jump. People are used to double jumping. Perhaps I should have emphasized in my welcome screen that this functions a lot like a double jump. Or rather, you start it as you would start a double jump. Yeah. Let's see what else we have here. After being knocked back, you should slowly return. This is something that both of these testers have fed back to me. Is as you lose ground, you should slowly return to your original starting position. So, for example, if I show it right here. So right now I've lost some ground. I'll lose a little bit more. There you go. So what they said is, from this position, you should slowly return to your starting position, which is, so right now we're here, right there. So about where this dot is actually, I didn't even notice that. Is that the same on maximize on play as well? I don't think so, but no, it's not. So yeah, that's one thing they've suggested, and one reason why they suggested this is it is to do with the wall jump. So wall jump itself, that's something I'm pretty sure I will change because I can understand people's feedback and why they didn't like it. But we'll get to that in the next person's feedback. So again, David was the most critical and also the most helpful. So first things first, don't like how it sends you back so quickly. It should be straight up. Don't like the second input. Yes, so that's to do with the wall jump itself. So he said that the wall jump knocks you back too far too quickly, which is something in hindsight I now see it. When I was making it to me, because I'm used to things like Salt and Sanctuary wall jumps and Hollow Knight wall jumps and darts. So for me, this seemed like a reasonable thing, but I would understand why for them it wouldn't be reasonable. As well as that, I understand that in those games you don't have a screen chasing you, so it's not an issue if you do this back forward thing. Whereas with this game it is. So that will be changed. I've already made up my mind that that is something that I will definitely change. Ceiling shouldn't kill. I also agree with that. I've changed that immediately, as you could see. Literally, as he was giving me this feedback, I've just went to the project and changed it straight away because I did find it frustrating myself. I don't know why it didn't occur to me to change it. Yeah, it should just be a simple ceiling, and yeah, he's right. It shouldn't kill you, and from now on, it will not. Yes, so jetpack controls are unnatural, which is again something Carl mentioned as well. It's to do with this is not how you usually jetpack in a game. So perhaps I should ditch the jetpack term and rename it a rocket booster. Carl also suggested that I should use a particle system, and the visual feedback showing particles coming this way would perhaps make it more clear to the player what is happening. So a particle system as part of a more graphically developed game would be essential, and that way people would understand better about what's happening. He felt very strongly about the 50 fuel needed to activate thing, and he said, I quote, "That has to go." Um, Now I may reduce it to 40 instead of 50, but I don't think I'm going to ditch that. Uh, and the reason the jetpack is there is because of how the regain of the jetpack works. So if I just demonstrate, let me run the jetpack down. So if we didn't have a limiter of some kind, in fact, let's just disable the limiter altogether. So where is my player jumping? I think we have a float compare here. Yes. So if I reduce this, let's say I reduce this to 0, and now I can jetpack whenever. That would completely change how you play the game. The jetpack in this game is supposed to be something that you are precious about. It's supposed to be a limited resource that you use to solve particular issues. Because one problem I had to solve with this game is why not just jetpack the whole time? I think not having that it seems like disabling that broke something else as well. I don't know what it could have been. Yeah, but either way, so not having a minimum amount of jetpack before you could activate it would mean that it would essentially make jumping redundant in a way. Because every time you would have to jump, you could just jetpack a little bit, and yeah, it would just make jumping redundant completely. Whereas with this approach, there are sections where you have to jump. Because if I made it so, then the game would just be completely about jetpacking, and it would not have any of the wall jumping, regular jumping features in it. It would just be a jetpack game, at which point I might as well get rid of the floor, and then before you know it, we're playing Flappy Birds. So that's why jetpack minimum is a thing. Now I think I could reduce it to 40 instead, maybe 35. Let's see, if I reduce this to 40, then what? Is it still going to break? Because for some reason it broke a second ago. Oh, for some reason the whole thing turned yellow now, which is interesting. Shouldn't be yellow. I'll have to look into why that is the case. But yeah, so if I bring this back to 50, there might be an FSM somewhere that I'm forgetting about that that gets fussy. Let's see. Nah, right now it seems okay. Seems okay. So it seems that there's something in my script somewhere that doesn't like this minimum being reduced, which is not a problem. I can work around that. But as I've said, I definitely don't want there not to be a minimum jetpack. I want people to have to make an informed decision about when to use the jetpack. And also there are particular sections of the game that specifically try to run your jetpack down to force you to solve situations without jetpack. Because again, the question with a game where you have regular platforming and the jetpack is, why not just use the jetpack all the time? And my answer to this problem is, because if you use it all the time, there will be sections where you will need it and you won't have it. And if you just had infinite jetpack, or not infinite, but if it wouldn't have a minimum, you would need to be you would be a lot less careful about when you're using it. Okay, speed boosts are very aggressive again. Well, not again, because I haven't talked about this before. Speed boost very aggressive. This is something I could look into as well. I do see where he's coming from. Maybe make them just half of what they are at the moment. And he also suggested that the player should return to their position naturally. I would say, if so, this would happen very slowly, because the idea with the your main motivation for picking up the speed boosters is to gain ground. And if you just regain the ground on your own, then why are you you wouldn't be so concerned about getting these things in the first place. But I suppose I could look into making them a little bit more aggressive, a little bit less aggressive, because yeah, they did find that it just kicks you forward very quickly. He also said that he thinks the game has solid core mechanics, which is interesting considering he criticized pretty much all of my core mechanics. In fact, he criticized pretty much all of my core mechanics, but I'm sure he had his reasons for saying so. So yeah, I will now proceed to review my project with this feedback in light, and I intend to get a couple more tests with the new project. So just to put things on the agenda here real quick while I have it in on the top of my head. So changes to consider: wall jump, more vertical, speed boost, less aggressive. What else did we want? Jetpack. No, I'm not gonna change the jetpack itself. I think it's just the term jetpack is confusing people. I think I'll just rename it rocket, because that's what it actually is. It's called the rocket runner, not jetpack runner. So I think we'll just have to clarify to people that this is not quite what you would expect from a jetpack. And again, a tutorial would help with this. Yes, return to starting position very slowly. Maybe reduce fuel minimum to 40. What else do we have? Ceiling shouldn't kill. What else do we have? Control, separate button, that's not gonna happen. That will happen. That will not happen. I'll just rename it to something else. That will not happen either. No, that already happened. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I will now definitely implement these three into the game. I'll consider this one as well. I still haven't decided. It would be a big change. I would need to look through a lot of my script, and it would also impact some of the challenges I've set up. And as I've said, I intend to get a second round of testing with the new changes and see how people felt about them.